Hello everyone, welcome back to the Peace, Love, and Happiness Club channel. I'm Jimmy and this is
Christian.
We brought Christian here because he loves orchids. He knows a lot about orchids and that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, tell me about your love for orchids and where it derived from, really.
Okay, well, I actually just moved here from Hawaii about a year ago. I did a lot of orchid work out there just through some communities and very popular culture out there for orchids. Kept buying a few of them, learned what they didn't like and what they did like, and got pretty good at it. Orchids are kind of similar to aroids in the sense that they're not necessarily terrestrial entirely. There are some terrestrial species of orchids, but for the most part, orchids are epiphytes, which means that they grow on the sides of trees, and they use these roots to anchor themselves to the trees. The nature and the way they grow, the colorful flowers, and the fact that they just come in so many varieties, that's kind of what triggered me to get into this.
So I believe these are endemic to Lowe's.
Yeah, basically.
But where do they really come from?
Oh, all over the world. You can find orchids in almost any tropical zone of the world, and there's even some native species here to Washington.
So I don't want to get like too nerdy into the DNA of things, but what makes an orchid really?
Common misconception about most of these flowers is when the flowers die, the plant dies, and that's not the case.
Oh wow, okay.
So orchids are, to me, they're a type of plant that you can't treat like a normal plant. You can't put them in soil, you can't treat them the way that you would treat an aroid or a begonia or anything that grows in the soil.
Okay.
Orchids like to grow on the sides of trees, so when you think about that, the water that they're getting is running off of the tree. So the common thing that kills most orchids is overwatering.
Like a lot of the other plants, yes.
Like a lot of other plants, but orchids in particular, they have these fat little roots.
Yeah, always see them. We have one in the front that has like roots that are like 5 feet long.
Yeah, and those roots will keep growing in a lot of cases.
Okay.
The thing with the roots is what you're seeing on the outside, this green and silver texture, that's actually something called velamen. And velamen is actually this coating of, it's like a spongy material that helps the plant root itself down to the tree.
It's super soft.
The root itself is actually in the very center of it.
Let's talk about the history of plants. Why they started circulating around the market and why we could find them at Trader Joe's and everything.
Orchids really, especially these particular orchids, started becoming really fashionable and trendy in like the 1870s Victorian era.
Okay.
A lot of botanists started collecting them from their native homelands, bringing them to England, and then they would sell them.
Before we had regulations. And
exactly,
everything.
yeah, before regulations, that was a thing then. But yeah, they would sell them or donate them to these rich families and that could afford these greenhouses, because back then greenhouses were pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So orchids like these were actually a sign of wealth. The hybridization aspect of it, because these actually are hybrids, what we consider complex hybrids, are a culmination of hundreds of different species being layered on top of each other with reproduction.
Wow. Nothing's real anymore. It's all hybrids.
yeah, it's all hybrids. But the cool thing about these hybrids is they make them hardier, more tolerant to different conditions outside of their normal growing zones.
Right, just like tissue culture plants. They make
Just
them
like
a little
tissue
bit
culture.
hardier. Yeah, okay.
And the ones that you're seeing here, the ones that you see in your Lowe's and your Home Depots, a lot of those are complex hybrids that have put so many different species in them now that you could bring them to almost any climate and they'll thrive.
You know, that's a great segue into the care of these things. Let's say I bought one from Home Depot. What is the first thing I need to do when I bring it home?
First thing I would say is clean it.
Clean it?
Yeah, clean it, believe it or not.
Are we talking about the actual leaf itself or the flower?
The whole foliage, so all your leaves, and take all the medium that's out. Just clean it off very gently. Just break off all the orchid bark, the sphagnum moss that might be on it, because you'd be surprised how many pests might be coming into those plants through that medium itself.
Especially working with like big box store plants and stuff like that. Okay,
big time.
That's a great tip.
The one thing I would say be careful with when you're doing all that cleaning with water, these are monopodial orchids, meaning they stem from 1 foot, monopodial 1 foot.
Yeah.
So the crown right here in the very center collects water very easily.
Okay.
And in nature, you have a lot of air motion, you have some heat, and that helps evaporate that water out rapidly. If you leave the water in there, you get crown rot, and that just basically eats away the whole
You
plant.
can just tell by the leaf itself, right? It's how it's pointing up. There's the midrib right there that probably runs all the water down into the middle and
Yep.
collects the water. So you just look at the plant itself or the foliage and see how it gets its water. So that's,
Yeah, absolutely.
that's really cool.
So if you notice that all your flowers start dropping off, don't be afraid. That does not mean your plant's dying. It just means that it's dropping its flowers. Sometimes these plants only bloom about once to twice a year. If you're lucky, maybe you can get a little bit more out of it, but that's typically about as much as it blooms. Unlike us, we're fall, spring, summer, so these are actually used to 2 seasons, wet and dry season. Typically in your wet season, it's gonna be a lot cooler and they're gonna get a lot more water. In your dry seasons, it gets a little bit more arid, but also the temperatures go up as well. That's what's gonna trigger these guys to bloom the most. My rule of thumb for most orchids is full view of the sky, but no direct sunlight.
What about humidity?
Humidity. So a lot of these orchids will never turn away a high level of humidity, somewhere in the 80 range. My rule of thumb for the humidity and the watering aspect of it is just let them dry out. As soon as you start seeing the silver on that root, it's a good time to water. You can see all the roots here.
Yeah.
If they start looking silver like this, sit it in a little cup of water for 5 minutes, take it out, put it back in your decorative
That
pot.
covers our little water thing. What
Yeah.
about feeding?
Feeding.
I see a lot of like orchid sprays. I even bought one
Yeah.
for myself. Like, do they really work?
They usually suggest spray some of the foliage and spray the roots,
Okay.
spray the root structure. If you don't want to go with a water-based fertilizer, you can use a pellet-based fertilizer to sit
Okay,
on top
and the
of the
Osmocote
medium.
and stuff
Yeah,
like
the
that?
Osmocote,
Yeah.
just a general fertilizer would work fine for them.
You know how the nutrients have numbers.
Mm-hmm.
What do you suggest?
So I was taught 13, 13, 13.
Okay,
Just
wow,
a standard
that's
across the board.
Very bad luck. So propagation, I love propagating my aeroids.
Mm.
How do we do with these things? Really quick, if you can describe it in 20 seconds, go.
Well, it is a little bit complicated with
Okay,
these guys.
so not 20 seconds.
Not 20 seconds, but I will say that a lot of these flower stems can sometimes actually stem off their own little plants.
Okay.
It's rare, and you can actually get rooting hormone and they have some things out in the market that you can
Oh,
get.
the Kiki cloning paste.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So each one of these, like a lot of aeroids,
Yeah.
also have these little nodes here.
The nodes, yeah.
Which is typically where your flowers are going to come out. But once your flowers all die off, occasionally you might get a keiki, which is a baby orchid.
Okay.
And that's one way you can propagate that, let it get mature, let it get its own roots, and then you just snip it off.
I mean, that sounds easy, but I'm pretty sure it's a lot harder than.
It's a rare thing though.
Okay.
That's the key there, is that it's kind of rare to get those things to do that.
Okay, like we said, they are epiphytes.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see these things mounted, but we're gonna save that for another video.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. If you guys love these orchids you guys see here, they are $28 a piece. You can find them here in store or online. I'll have the links down in the description below. And I guess that's it. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.